And here we go. Hi, friends. Your Buddhist guide, Sylvain Chamberlain, Sifu to some, Nudo to others. Just your Buddhist friend, a humble monk, sharing his studies with you in the hopes of making Buddhism more accessible and easier for you to understand. Today, I'm out in the Kwun, in the Quantum Life Buddhist School, the Threefold Lotus Kwun. Kwun being a Chinese origin word, meaning sacred place of practice and study. Similar to what in Japanese would be called a dojo. But this school is about Buddhism, the humanities. We do some Qigong exercises, Tai Chi, art, painting, sculpture, all things relating to tapping into our fundamental samsaric selves driven by our inner Buddha mind. So, it's nice to be out here in the school again. I hope the quality of this video is good. The image I'm seeing looks a little overexposed. I don't know, I might have to work on that. Let me know in the comments what you think. What's important to me isn't so much that you see my stubble, but that you hear me. And so in that, I will try to have good diction so that you can understand me. And today we're going to finish up chapter 14, and I have again something to say in addition to that. Maybe it should be a separate video, but I'm going to include it in this one. If there is a pulsing that you see in the light, I'm not sure, I don't see it on the monitor, but you may see it on the final video. It's because I have a slow moving fan above me trying to move the air, because it is rather hot and humid here in Mississippi. So a little air will keep me from staining my robes and dripping sweat on my glasses as I speak to you. Okay, so let's start with Daimoku Sancho, as always. Please join me. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Nam Myoho Renge Kyo. Namo Myoho Renge Kyo. Thank you so much for joining me. I so appreciate you guys. Okay, so where we left off on chapter 14 of the most recent translation, which, you know, I read before I do these videos. I go back to my old standard, and then occasionally check out the 19th century H. Kern translation. It's out of sync at this point with these translations, as these have 28 chapters, and H. Kern from the Chinese work from Kumarajiva that he was working with, and there are several translations, only had 27 chapters. But be that as it may, we had left off in the verse section where I'll just recap the last few lines so that you'll recall. Among all the sutras, this sutra is highest. I have always guarded and protected it and never recklessly revealed it. This is the right time to teach it for all of you. So, as I said in closing the last video, that's a reference to the time and the capacity, and again, a redress to the previous 42 years of his teaching life, that he had kept this teaching close to his heart, but not revealed it because his students simply weren't ready for it. They didn't have the capacity to understand it. So everything he taught until this point was preparatory, not false, not incomplete would be a tasty word to throw in there, but not so. As he's revealed in other chapters, he's always taught the same thing. It's just that at this point, he's able to reveal it in a way that, with all of the previous teaching, his students will be able to understand the efficacy of how truly profound and simple this awakening of the Buddha mind truly is. But without understanding what the Buddha mind is, how the mind works to begin with, what the nature of attraction and attachments and so forth are, the idea of attaining Buddhahood or Buddha mind isn't properly distinct from the samsaric mind. So it took 42 years of teachings at 2,600 years ago to elevate people's capacity to understand the profound nature of what he's teaching. And now, in the Lotus Sutra, we have it. So on that note, I will go into my little diatribe for a moment. I am utterly dumbfounded, I guess is the word. I read all the time. I never know enough. And there's so much on Shakyamuni Buddha's teachings and the scholarship after his extinction. I don't think I'll ever run out of material to read. But there's one consistent thing in the translations that I have to read, because I speak English and French. I read well in English. I also speak Spanish, and I read well in Spanish. I don't read so well in French, simply because I didn't have higher education in French. So I'm conversational, but reading and writing French is rather difficult. And if I'm going to dive into another language, it probably, because I'm conversational in French, I probably choose Chinese or perhaps. I'm not sure. But at any rate, the Western scholarship on Buddhism has really, really been a point of contention with me ever since I've started really diving into study. There are, again, H. Kern from the late 1800s on, a lot of scholarship about Buddhism has come from English-speaking countries. English-speaking countries, more notably, that have been very, very culturally buried in Judeo-Christian religions. And the reason I bring that up isn't to bash religion, although I've made my thoughts on that clear. That's not what I want to talk about here. What I want to clarify here is that there's been, even in intellectual circles and scholarship, a real tendency to move the translations or the transliterations of the Chinese documents that most of them work with, some all the way back to the Sanskrit and the Pali, but in general, a lot of those have disappeared, and what is extant of those Sanskrit and Pali translations are the Chinese interpretations. But all of that aside, there's this concerted effort, more or less, depending on which translation you read, and you'll see it I encourage you to read multiple translations of each sutra, especially this Lotus Sutra, and you will see the inculcation of Western dogma and Christian thinking that's imposed on Buddhist thought. It's entirely inappropriate, and in some cases, if not maybe all, there's an effort to minimize the Buddhist thought in favor of, this colloquial little practice that those people, those Asians do. It'll never amount to the glory of what we practice, but they don't say that outright. They just sort of, you know what I'm talking about. These days, I mean, I don't even know what a current scholar would do if they were a Trump supporter. I don't want to get political, but I'm just saying we live in an era now, not just Trump, but all over the world, of very crass, brutal kind of uh, oration and unapologetic, uh, racism and nationalism and one-upism and just very juvenile kind of representation, and people seem to be eating that up. And I just go back to Shakyamuni's prophecy that we live in an age of greed, anger, and stupidity. So I see examples of that constantly, and when I see it in scholarship, it's very, very disturbing. Um, and I've talked about the word faith and how that doesn't belong in Buddhism because it's a whole kind of thinking that doesn't exist in Buddhism. Buddhism uses terms like a strong mind, determination, convictions, very good words that come from English to interpret what's being said, but somehow we'll water it down and say, well, this is their little version of faith. It has nothing, it's just a complete bastardization of the meaning. So I don't like using that word because it's wrong. But to my point in this video, I've read a lot of scholarship, English scholarship, about the Lotus Sutra, and there's this, whether they mention it in passing or whether they talk about it a lot, there's this idea that the Lotus Sutra is just a self-congratulatory document, very flowery, but it has no real meat. It doesn't really tell you anything about how to practice Buddhism. It's just this wonderful self-congratulatory piece of writing that really wanders along and has no direct usable information. It's just fluff. Well, then to those who write those kind of stupidities, let me ask you why it is the single most popular book amongst all Asian communities, especially those practicing Buddhism. Huh? For thousands of years. They just like fluff, I guess. Those silly little Asians. I'm really, you can tell, I'm very sick of that attitude. Because as I do this series of videos, and now we're just getting to the center of the Lotus Sutra, chapter-wise, I think it's abundantly clear that there's nothing more direct than the repeated statement over and over again to a stanza, a sentence, a word, recite, intone it, right? Incantations, chant, even just one word, one sentence of this sutra. Embrace it, read, recite, copy, teach it. Are those not really direct instructions? Am I just stupid? Do I not hear this? It's in many, many chapters. Read, and it's repeated. That's a very, very direct manual of how to practice Buddhism, is it not? So how can they make these statements? And now we're in the 14th chapter, and you could say that to embrace, read, recite Myoho Renge Kyo, the title of every chapter, the title of the entire book, and to teach it, to recite it, to read, to copy it, embrace it. Again, I'm repeating this. You've heard this several times, and you'll read it several times. If you read it, no matter what the translation, it'll be there. That's the formal practice, right? That's how to practice Buddhism. And then the 14th chapter says, the question is asked from the month, okay, we know, dear Shakyamuni Buddha, now the formal practice. But when we're not formally practicing, reciting, reading, chanting, how do we behave Because now what's important is the Bodhisattva practice. And that's what this book is all about. So a Bodhisattva is a monk amongst the people. I can't just cloister myself in a hole and read, recite, copy. How do I teach this? That's the Bodhisattva part. How do I bring others to this teaching? How do I behave? This is huge. This is something we haven't covered in any other teaching. This is the meat of the Lotus Sutra. How do I be a Bodhisattva formally and informally? How do I navigate this life in the world? Because remember, before this, like the Hinayana, Theravada, Buddhahood's only achieved when you die. So all you have to do your whole life is study. Study is paramount. Study and meditate on the study. Study and contemplate on the study. But to teach it means that I have to attain Buddhahood and share it and bring others to Buddhahood in this life. Ta-da! That was the goal. The goal was how to live this life well without suffering. Liberation of suffering. This is in the Four Truths, right? All life is suffering. What leads to suffering is cravings. Stop the cravings. Liberate yourself from suffering. Right? This is the way to do it, the Bodhisattva practice. Not waiting until death. We're not a cult of death like every other religion on the planet. I don't even think of this as a religion because this is a manual for how to live life well. Right? So the 14th chapter is all about that. So we have the formal practice and we have the informal practice. This should be your attitude. This is how you treat others. These are people you associate with. These are people you avoid. Rules for living life well. And this is why he says, among all the sutras, amongst all the teachings, this is the highest. I have always guarded and protected it and never recklessly revealed it. This is the right time to teach it for all of you. After my extinctions, all those who seek the Buddha way and want to preach this sutra in peace and comfort should tie themselves tightly to these four teachings. The four I enumerated, or he enumerated, in part 1 of these videos of chapter 14. Everyone who reads this sutra will always be free from anxiety and stress and from illness and pain. Their faces will be fresh and bright. They will not be born poor, servile, or ugly. I know you might not, you might harbor doubts after seeing my stubbly, ugly face. But I am not Buddha. I have a Buddha mind, just as you do, and working hard to maintain it. Living beings will delight in seeing them and respect them as sages or saints. Children from heaven will be their servants. You have to remember this is 2,600 years ago. So social views were a little bit twisted. And still today in India with the caste system. I'll continue. They will not be struck by swords or sticks. Poison will not harm them. If anyone speaks ill of them or curses them, that person's mouth will be closed. They will be able to go anywhere without fear like lion kings. The radiance of their wisdom will shine like the sun. Even in their dreams, they will see only wonderful things. Various Tathagatas sitting on lion seats preaching the Dharma to groups of monks around them. And dragons and spirits, Ashuras and others, numerous as the sands of the Ganges, their palms together in reverence, and they will see themselves there teaching the Dharma for others. They will see Buddhas with their characteristic golden bodies, radiating immeasurable light, illuminating all things, their Brahma voices preaching what they had been taught. What had been taught. For the four groups, the Buddha will be teaching the unexcelled Dharma, and they will find themselves among them praising the Buddha with palms together. They will hear the Dharma with joy, make offerings, master incantations, and witness to the wisdom of never backsliding. When the Buddha knows they have entered deeply into the Buddha way, then he will assure them of reaching the highest true awakening. You, my good son, in a future life will obtain immeasurable wisdom, the great way of the Buddha. Your land will be decorated and pure and incomparably huge. The four groups will be there with palms together listening to the Dharma. They will also see themselves in mountains and forests, studying and putting into practice the good Dharma and witnessing to the reality of things. Deep in meditation, they will see the Buddhas in all directions, golden-colored Buddhas adorned with hundreds of signs of blessings. Those who hear and teach for others will always have good dreams like this. They will dream they are kings who forsake palaces and servants and the exquisite wonders of the five desires to go to the place of the way. They will sit on lion seats under Bodhi trees, and after seeking the way for 7 days, attain the wisdom of Buddhas. Having attained the unexcelled way, they will get up and turn the Dharma wheel, and for the four groups, they will teach the Dharma for tens of millions of billions of eons. After teaching the flawless, wonderful Dharma, Myoho Renge Kyo, and saving innumerable living beings, they will enter nirvana, as the smoke stops when a lamp goes out. If anyone in an evil age to come teaches this preeminent Dharma, they will gain great benefits, such as the blessings above that I've already listed. So that's how chapter 14 ends. A strong exhortation to practice formally and informally as he's described repeatedly. And he's going to continue to repeat it. He's going to add more profundity to this, more understanding, answer more questions. And the Lotus Sutra is that. This is the preeminent teaching. This is the ultimate Buddhist practice. There can be no question. So how it can be reported amongst intellectuals that it's just a meandering book of fancy, self-congratulatory book of fancy. It's not self-congratulations. It's, hey, this is it. This is the way to be enlightened, to practice Buddhism and to become a Buddha. This is the way. This is the Bodhisattva way. Here, read, recite, copy, teach. Oh, and behave like this. Don't hang around these kinds of people. Watch your influences. What is all that about? It's about attaining Buddhahood in this life, as a human being, in samsaric conditions. It's very, very clear that Buddhahood doesn't come after death. That this life isn't a trial, something to atone. That in fact, this life is the precious Buddhahood in itself. It's an opportunity. Samsara, the condition of samsara, the condition we have of being self-conscious and observing our mind at work, is the great beneficence of a human life. Look how rare it is. Scientists are looking all over the universe. Every year they seem to have more powerful tools to look further and more. And they can't find any other planet or any other place where there's people like us running around trying to slap each other around and take advantage of one another. Where Buddhahood might be a goal. They can't even find humanity. They can't find insects running around. They can't find signs of living life. It's unfathomable how huge this universe is. And this universe is just a blip. It's just a blip from potential energy. It's just this moment. And we, you and I, here, perceiving ourselves in this little tiny speck of space can observe it. How amazing is that? It's amazing. It's way too small a word. It just knocks me down. And the fact that we can observe it is the reason we can reach our Buddha mind. Our Buddha mind is the observer. And that's right here and now. It's not tomorrow. All it requires is a slight change in your perception. It sounds so simple, but it's so hard. You ever try to break a habit? It's so hard because our attachments to behaviors, our attachments to and that's what the 14th chapter is all about. You have to overcome these attachments. You can't kill them off. See, that's the ridiculousness of the whole experiment about stop your mind thinking. Sit in meditation and stop your mind. That whole exercise was to prove to early practicants that it cannot be done. What can be done is that you can remove yourself from the attachments that create that ceaseless mind, because that's samsara itself. You can watch it at work. You can watch your thoughts arise and ask yourself, where the hell did that come from? It doesn't matter. It came from cravings that you can't possibly understand. They're energy that just pops up, and they pop up it's kind of like a Ouroboros, a snake chasing its own tail. They pop up because of cravings. When they pop up, they create cravings. They create attachments. Attachments to what? To continuing that craving. That's that samsaric wannabe. And it instantiates constantly, every single moment. And that's what we are. We are that process. And you know what? That process is the same for every phenomena we experience. And it's happening, and we can observe it within our minds. So the Buddha mind is a way of observing it without being attached to it. It's kind of a duality, but it's a trick. Might be the wrong word, but it's a device for us to exist in this duality while at the same time not being influenced by it. Observe, and this is where Buddhist compassion comes from, because when we can simply observe it, not be influenced by it, we can perceive the tremendous force of it and the suffering that that force precipitates. It just makes us want to appease it, right? We want to make it uninfluential to everyone, so everyone can relax, not suffer, and enjoy this amazing, precious perception of the process of life. This is what the Lotus Sutra is all about. So, this is a short one, but we completed the 14th. I don't want to jump into the 15th because that's where we're all born mentally, as the rising of the Bodhisattvas of the earth. It's a tremendously powerful chapter in its own, but with this video, we'll complete part 2 of chapter 14. Please join me for the next one. Incredible appreciation for your being here for this one. I hope it all makes sense. If it doesn't, comment. Let me know. Like this video. Participate. Thank you again. Love you guys. Sancho. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Namu Myoho Renge Kyo. Sorry about that interruption. My screen went black, and as usual, I forgot to plug in the laptop. So once again, thank you so much. Great appreciation. Have a wonderful day.